For the week of April 2nd, 2020, the United States has broken the 200,000 mark in terms of cases of COVID-19, making America the nation with the most reported cases in the world. The stock market has broken a record for the worst first quarter in Wall Street history, and all this news has nearly broken my spirit. But Politicon's panel this week, coming to you from Los Angeles, St. Petersburg, Florida, Denver, Colorado, and Raleigh, North Carolina, will, I hope, liven things up some and perhaps give us a little bit of hope as they help us answer the question, how the heck are we going to get along? Hey, I'm Clay Aiken, and we are once again self-distancing ourselves from our normal live studio audience this week. But our panel this week is still going to be taking your questions, and this time I believe we're all doing it from the comfort of our homes. Columnist, commentator, author, and advocate Sally Kohn is with us this week. Comedian, actress, and writer Aida Rodriguez. Political commentator, columnist, author, and U.S. Air Force veteran Paulina. And the founder and president of nonprofit group Empowered and director of outreach for Gun Owners of America, Antonia Okafor, is with us. Hello, ladies. Welcome to How the Heck Are We Going to Get Along?
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being with us. Anna, I'm going to start with you because you are in Florida right now. Is that right?
Correct.
And you have, in Florida, just finally, for the first time, Governor DeSantis declared today that there would be a stay-at-home order in Florida through the end of the month. There's been, a little bit of controversy, I think, with him waiting longer than some people thought he might to enact that. And throughout that period of time where he was making up his mind, other governors have done it in different orders. California did it weeks ago. New York did it a week ago. North Carolina, we started ours on Monday. There's some inconsistencies, some might say, in the order that these things are being done. Others might argue that this is states' rights and states are making decisions for themselves on what's best for their area. What's the sense in Florida, and what's the sense from you on whether it's inconsistency from state to state, whether it's better that we're doing it on a state-by-state basis, or if we should be having more leadership nationwide?
I think that it's better that we go on a state-by-state basis. And I can say that in the beginning, when you had, this first rumor of, this thing called Corona, a lot of people didn't know what to really expect, right? I know there was a lot of disinformation going out, not just from, our own media people that were assuming a lot, but even places like China. Now we know it's a big threat. Initially, Florida responded by asking people to be responsible, do the social distancing, try not to do large publicly gathered areas. But the problem in Florida is we have such a strong economy based on tourism, and a lot of people were coming here to spring break, not even taking it seriously. So for us, with the response that DeSantis did do, and now that everyone is at home and being responsible, I think it's the best thing that we could have done. I think that, again, this is one of those things that no one really knows what to expect. And obviously, you don't want people, regardless of party affiliation, whether they're old or young, getting hurt and getting sick. And I think that, given circumstances, it was a responsible way that was handled. And I'm glad that people are now listening and erring on the side of caution.
Aida, better to have a state-by-state thing or nationwide?
What's interesting is that I'm from Florida, and within Florida itself, there were different mandates according to cities. Because in Miami, Mayor Suarez and Jimenez they implemented a curfew in Miami where people can't go out between 10 and 5 a.m. in the morning. I agree with what she said because I'm from Florida and I know how much New York comes to Miami for spring break, and people come there and they party and they do whatever they want. But I think that there has to be some accountability for all of the citizens of the country at some point, and there has to be something national in place. But I think that I understand why people feel threatened by that, because that feels a lot like, I don't know, Cuba, but
You absolutely are right. I mean, people were going out basically completely disregarding it. We're even worrying about the fact that there's so many older people that are susceptible to this. So I think it's, your voice, especially with the younger generation, getting people to realize, hey, this is our responsibility to really care for the older generation as well. We all need to be doing our part.
Yeah. And what's funny? It's like they highlight Florida, and for right now, I think it's so important for us to be more concerned with the people than the politics, right? We're so partisan. We get we do the Yankees Red Sox thing, but people are dying, and people that we know are contracting COVID, and it is becoming something that's very ugly. So I just think right now we should really be focusing on the well-being of our citizens. Florida has a lot of older people, but they like to highlight Florida because Florida is good for the news because a lot of crazy things do happen in Florida. But people were not staying at home all over, and they always make it seem like it's this redneck thing in Florida. But if you look at Brentwood in California, which is a more affluent community, they were out there on Sunday for the farmers market, and they were out there with babies on top of each other saying that they were supporting small businesses.
Sally, what part of the reason that I think things have become a little bit political is that there is this divide now between those who believe that it's more important that we keep people safe and people healthy and protected from the virus versus this group of folks who think we need to protect the economy and get the economy back open again. What do you feel is the most important, Sally?
I mean, it's truly one of these moments. I can't believe we're having this conversation, and to be honest, I can't believe. I mean, obviously, I'm a partisan. Obviously, I'm a lefty and Democrat and all those things. But good Lord, I really did think that this would be the kind of moment that folks on the right, and especially Trump and the Trump supporters, could put it all to the side and just say, we are all Americans. This is a disaster. This is a crisis. We need to come together. We're not going to make this a political issue. We're not going to wear campaign hats to CDC. We're not going to bash the other party. We're going to stop attacking the media. We're going to all finally pull together. And the fact that so much of the basic science and survival has been politicized and politicized by the right, frankly. I mean, there's not
real quick, sorry to interrupt, but don't you think that, in a circumstance when you had information coming from China, and that China wasn't necessarily forthcoming with the information that they're presenting to the United States government in regards to how we should respond to it, don't you think that is a factor in all this? Because now you even had today during President Trump's press conference, him coming out to say, look, this is not the flu. Initially, he wasn't even getting the right information from their sources that they had. And, people are wanting to work together. You have every single major manufacturing company trying right now to do what they can, money aside, to literally donate and use their facilities to manufacture masks, to manufacture ventilators. I mean, people don't want this. And, frankly, as someone who is, polar opposite, I don't want you to get sick. I don't want Democrats to be sick. I just want people to go back to normal, and more people will suffer if the economy shut down permanently. Mainly, that would basically lead to, in my opinion, a global depression, and that more people will die because of that.
Well, we're heading.
I agree with Anna with that. I agree with Anna in the whole aspect of things that, we obviously, I don't think you even needed to make that partisan at all. I don't think it's a Democrat versus Republican thing at all. I think it's essentially the difference that we're having is the difference we always have, and that's the role of government. Republicans feel that they should allow local government to make the decisions, and then a lot of Democrats are wanting more big government to overreach and to take part of this whole situation and to mitigate this situation. And so I think that's part of it, is that we just have very different ideas of how we're going to get through this. But I don't think it's a partisan.
Okay. I mean, here's the problem: is fact and science don't necessarily have to be partisan, and they get politicized when they're inconvenient. And so I obviously didn't have all the information about this crisis early on. And there are certain things. I mean, look, I'm a proud capitalist, and there are certain things that I know the market can't handle. And there are certain things we need government to do. And there are certain things that I support my local government. I believe in localization, and there are certain things that local governments can't do. So, it's no one here is a absolutist on anything, but at a certain point, this is it's eerily similar in a way to Russia interfered in our election. Like, everyone seems to agree. Whoa. Just, excuse me, I let you talk. Everyone agreed our intelligence services, the people we have historically relied on left, right, and center to keep us safe, all agreed on that. And we had one notable person who didn't and denied the facts and the reality. And similarly, listen, obviously the White House knew that coronavirus is dangerous enough because they sent all of our medical equipment, a lot of our medical equipment over to China to help. So, listen, like, I don't understand. I was raised when you make a mistake, you admit it.
Well,
we didn't respond fast enough. And I'm
sorry.
hang on. I'm sorry. I'm still talking.
Sally, let's let Sally finish, and then Anna, you can hop in.
And more importantly is, listen, hailing from New York, obviously there are moments, and this is, by the way, also left, right, and center, just like you have Republicans saying, let's give cash assistance to Americans and not just big business, right? By the way, everybody wants government to do something. It's just a few people on the right who want to bail out just corporate America. But even Republicans are saying we have to give money to people. But similarly, you can't just leave New York to fend for itself and have state by state compete over getting life-saving equipment. You have to have a traffic cop in this. You have to have good Lord, this is why we are the United States of America. If we don't actually see a role for government in this moment, what the hell are we doing?
Well, let Anna get in here.
So back in January, Senator Tom Cotton was actually tracking this and did advise at that time to Congress that basically we needed to get ahead of this. Now, no one anticipates that we are going to have something like this, a global pandemic, hit the United States. And the fact is that the United States was not prepared for this because of previous administrations, previous policies, whether they're Democrat or Republican. So you can't just blame one person, one party for this not responding fast enough, when at the end of the day, you literally have Ford Motors, someone who's coming together to make 50,000 ventilators, every single other manufacturer, those companies that received bailouts like Boeing and the other airline companies are literally operating, using their facilities not only to deliver equipment for free, but to manufacture the things that we need.
They should, because they don't take care of their employees. They got bailouts. They make a lot of money from the American people who work, and they should be manufacturing and stuff. And what's happening right now is not a battle of ideology.
One more second, I'll let you go. Even one more thing. I mean, you look at the fact that we don't have enough masks. All of those masks were being made in Malaysia, places like China, places that we sent our American industry over to. So we could not, no matter what we tried, if we wanted to supply our own hospitals, our own veterans hospitals with the equipment that they needed. So to seriously hold the United States government and people that have been elected basically 4 years ago accountable for this is irresponsible. And frankly, it's not the time or the place for it.
No, they should be held accountable, because if we don't hold them accountable, we can't hold Obama accountable for everything that happens now. I know, but you said previous feminism. But Donald Trump doesn't. I know that, but Donald Trump does it all the time. So let's not act like we don't hear him every single time that there is. Let me finish talking, because I was talking. We're not having a battle between ideologies about government. We're having a battle in America between the haves and the have-nots. And that is the battle that we're having. These corporations who have their feet on the necks of the American working people. It's very easy for a privilege to talk about things that the average working person is struggling with right now. And so when we have these conversations about what's happening right now, all these senators, and I'm talking about Nancy Pelosi's ass too. I'm not just talking about Republicans. You're talking about a bunch of people who are doing just fine right now. Ted Cruz, COVID, but he's going to be okay. It's not like the poor people throughout the country who will not have access to not even the test. So who do we hold accountable? Of course, we have to hold our government accountable.
Let me get in and because I don't want to ignore the comment and the angle you were taking, Aida, but I want to get back a little bit to Antonia's earlier remark. I want to ask you, Antonia, is there a role for the federal government at all? Because it sounded like you implied maybe, and I'm not putting words in your mouth. It sounded like maybe you were saying the states and the local government should be making these decisions when it comes to quarantine. But when we have a country where interstate travel is free, is there not a place and a time when the federal government should get involved to keep other states protected from something that's going out of control in New York?
Yeah, I absolutely think that there are places and times when the federal government can get involved. I think Trump has been doing exactly what he should be doing, which is advising states, advising governors on what they should be doing. Example of what he's doing right now with the 15-day, now 30-day this social distancing program that he has. It is to advise. It is to make sure that those governors have what they need in order to govern their states correctly. Because like Cuomo even said, New York is not the same thing as Dallas. Dallas is not the same thing as San Francisco. So those people and those places are the ones who are going to know their people. They're going to know how they best to govern, and then they're going to be able to know how to be able to implement the policies that are best for their people. So that's really what it comes down to.
Right, but do you worry at any point about those folks who are infected in New York going to Dallas? I mean, I guess that's the question. And Sally, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to get you to jump in here and tell me if I'm interpreting it right. I think that's where some of the concern is, that the federal government should be more involved, because a disease is not something that the governor of New York can contain within the state of New York on his own, and it travels around the country. Is that where you're saying the federal government should have a larger role, Sally?
Well, I'm saying that, look, I understand that nobody wants to inject politics into this. And I also, am old enough to remember 8 years of President Obama, who I enthusiastically supported and criticized when he was wrong and made missteps. So listen, the more our current president can do right on this, the better. I want us to succeed in this, but I think it takes leadership. And we're talking about a pandemic for a reason, just like you want to have countries, right? We said before, you want to have, China being transparent and sharing its information. You want to know, well, what worked in South Korea and what worked in here and what worked there and what is Italy doing? What are they learning? And how can we, just like we want to have the global community sharing information and even resources, as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. sent medical devices abroad. There was a story today that Politico reported that the White House called up Bangkok and said, well, hey, do you have any medical devices you can send to us? And they said, actually, you just sent a whole bunch to us at this exact moment, interestingly. So just like you want to have the world community coordinating, you want to have our nation actually functioning as a nation. And it's not just about the porousness between states, which is certainly a factor, right? That if one, there's different rules for one neighborhood than another, that you're going to easily see how those rules break down. But also you need to be able to disperse tools, life-saving tools and resources to communities when there are hotspots. And the states can't manage that, right? You need actually someone with that bird's eye view looking down at the whole nation saying, okay, right now we need resources in Detroit and New York City and New Orleans, but in a few weeks we're going to need them here and there. And how are we going to get these extra doctors and ventilators? And that is actually the role of the federal government, just like preventing pandemics and planning for these things and having teams in place, full teams in place that are monitoring things around the world. That's why, again, if we literally don't have if we don't understand the role of a federal government for this kind of thing, I don't really understand why we have one.
Anna, we have a question from Tariq in Philadelphia. I want to let you answer hers, but I want to throw this in too. Tariq in Philadelphia says, "Are we all nationalists in a pandemic?" And I want to attack onto that and say, the president has certainly been a strong supporter of the United States being the most powerful, strongest country in the world. And I could think some would argue that he has a nationalist streak to some of his rhetoric. Are we supposed to be? Should we be nationalists in a pandemic? That's Tariq's question. And is the president behaving like a nationalist right now?
I think the president's behaving like he cares for this country. And I can say that, part of the role of what he's doing, and he's been doing great with setting up FEMA, allowing FEMA to actually take in donations to disperse accordingly around the country. You have everyone that should be working together for the betterment of this country. But I can say that, to answer this question twofold, because of our manufacturing capability, because of the fact that you have so many of these businesses stepping up to the plate like GM, Honeywell, Ralph Lauren, Brooks Brothers, Under Armour, Boeing, Lockheed Martin. I mean, we're talking about not just millions of masks being in production and gowns and ventilators, but in the next couple of weeks or here with the production kicked on and with the fact that the president's really seen an uptick in manufacturing capability that we haven't seen since World War II, we're not just going to be able to help the United States, we're going to be able to help the world. And I think that right now, like the president says, fighting an invisible enemy, politics aside, we should be doing everything that we can to make sure that there is a limited loss of life. And if that means, having these organizations, these businesses step up to do so, then absolutely. And if that means loving your country and supporting every step of the way, then that's something that we should all be doing.
Aida, is the president or this administration doing anything right in this pandemic? Have they handled anything in a way that you're satisfied?
Well, they're not a monolith. So when we talk about the government and when we talk about the Republican Party and the GOP, a lot of people who are not right wingers, get into this conversation and they paint them all with a broad stroke. I think that there is some validity to there's a spectrum of people who support the Republican Party. When you see some people that say this is not okay, and some of these things are not being handled properly, and I don't agree with you. I don't think what I think Donald Trump has done has been, he is campaigning, meanwhile addressing a pandemic. And so we can't do that right now. So when you target the governor of Michigan, or when you are having a battle of who has the biggest whatever with the governor of New York, that's not conducive to survival for the people of the country. And so I do think that there has to be some accountability. I do not respect people who support Donald Trump who cannot say when he does things wrong. I don't respect people like that, because I love Obama, right? I voted for Obama, but I think that Obama did a great disservice to people of color. I think that there was a spike in people being deported, a lot of the things that I don't stand for. And I was able to say that. But when you talk to people who support Trump, it seems like some of them, because all of them are not, they're the cult people, just like they got the Bernie cult people. And then you have the people who can say, yeah, I don't really rock with that. I don't think that that's okay for him to say this about a person. I don't think this is very presidential. I don't think this behavior is very mature. I don't think that this is coming from the standpoint of humanity. But I just think that this whole celebrity worship thing that people have developed with Donald Trump, people of color trying to associate with upward mobility and shitting on themselves, like I don't rock with that.
So you make a really good point, and I want to pose the same question that you posed in a way to Antonia in a second, but where you asked about people who support Trump being able to call him out when he's done something wrong. But just to call you out for a second, the question was, has President Trump done anything right in this? And if you think the answer to that is no, then I'm fine with it. But I wanted to see if you could answer it for me. Has he done anything right?
Well, I mean, I think that as he is coloring by numbers, right? So there are days where I feel like, okay, he's trying to do something. One thing you can see on his face is, I don't know if y'all can see it, but when you see Donald Trump and you can see the worry on his face, when I finally saw that worry, that's when I got scared, because he looked like, I don't know what's going on. Can I tell you that I think he does everything wrong? No. And if he does everything wrong, then every other president has done it. I am not one of those people that thinks that anybody is perfect. I think that everybody is multifaceted. Do I like the way that he operates? No, I don't like the way that he behaves. I don't like the way I hate the way that he talks to people. I don't like the way he talks to women. The people in Michigan, I know people in Michigan who are suffering right now. So whether you have a problem with that, the governor of Michigan or not, I don't. But do I think he does?
Right.
Go ahead.
No, I was. I mean, I was.
I can hear you breathing. Like I hear you breathing hard. So I'm like, let her get it out.
No.
I hope you're not sick now, Sally.
Amen. No. I'm happy to say things I think he's done well, which is, I think that, engaging a task force, taking it seriously, especially having Dr. Fauci and experts and epidemiologists in the lead, trying to speed both vaccines and tests, and trying to expand and clear some of the path to that for the FDA. Again, things I wish had happened sooner, but I'm glad they're doing now. I'm glad he's taking the disease seriously, not saying it's not like the flu. I'm glad he he backed down from wanting to open everything back up on Easter and extended the federal guidelines. So I think that there's a lot of movement. And by the way, mobilizing manufacturing, toward life-saving devices, critical. All of those things are positive. I have to say, I have, a close friend of ours' father died of coronavirus. And I keep thinking about him, and I keep thinking, not red, not blue, not left, not right, not Democrat, not Republican, but as Americans, did this have to happen? And what could we and should we have done differently? And therefore, how does that inform what we could and should be doing differently now to prevent this? And what is hard for me in this moment is I feel like he's certainly the first person I've known to die, may not be the last from this disease, and that we're all going to suffer extraordinarily, not only these personal losses, but obviously this economic hardship, the hardship of just being pent up for all this time. And it is pretty hard to look at places like South Korea that had their same diagnosis, same first case on the same day, and have effectively addressed it, and wonder what could we have done differently. Because I have to say, I don't believe that America is exceptional, but I do believe we're extraordinary. And I don't think our response has been very extraordinary. And we may not always be as united as we'd like to be, but I believe we aspire to be united, and our response has not been united. And
Antonia, I told you I'd come to you. I want to give you the opportunity.
We're not South Korea.
But I want to give you the opportunity, Antonia, to respond to her, but
so
also
more of us die?
to let us know if there's anything.
Your answer is, well, we're Americans, so we die? I mean, what's your point?
I'm not saying that. You were saying that
we should have been better than this.
What could we have done to prevent this? To prevent a global
faster
pandemic?
Testing,
we were able
quicker
to do
public information.
Okay, and before I even go into that, I was going to say that like you said, all Trump supporters are not the same. And I will be one of the first people who are going to be consistent in that, saying a lot of Republicans, particularly conservatives and libertarians, did not like the way he handled with the stimulus package of putting a $2 trillion stimulus package through. I mean, we do not believe that is part of what government should be doing. And for Republicans to have pushed that through, that's something where, again, people look at those responses and how we handle the situations and then say we're hypocrites. So I totally understand that there are definitely people who don't support everything that he does. But at the end of the day, we are all Americans, and we're going to kind of like the nationalist type of thinking of we're going to support United States first. And there are different ways of how we handle this pandemic versus South Korea versus Italy. And that's okay. We're just going to have to figure out what is best for the over 300 million people in the United States with 50
But
states.
Is there an argument? Is there an argument at all, though, that if we're having far more cases than per capita than some of those other countries, the way we're handling it may not be the best way, even for us? Anna, you can answer, or Antonia, either one.
Yeah, I was going to just interject. I mean, initially looking back at what happened, we didn't even really know that there was a problem until these poor people in China were literally releasing videos on TikTok because their journalists and whistleblower doctors were literally getting killed by the Chinese government for speaking out as to what was happening. Then the United States responds by trying to send some of the best scientists that we have and pathologists in the world.
Well, can we say this though? Is it safe to say that when people say that China withheld information from us, why is it that we are surprised? I mean, when do we expect China to be honest and forthcoming with us? When that becomes like a talking point like that, I feel like it's a communist country. Look at the poor people that live over there. We
do agree on this. We agree that China is not necessarily going to be giving us the most honest
so why do we rely on it?
Can we blame them then? Is that your point, Aida? Can we blame them for not giving us information if we should have expected it?
We should err on the side of caution. Like we're better than that. We're smarter than that. Do we really rely on the people that we say we don't trust? We've been hearing about how much we don't trust China. How if they don't bend the knee, we're gonna disconnect from them. We've been talking about this for a long time.
I can say that, back when China, and I totally agreed with you on that one, back when China was literally putting out a video of their own people saying, we're healthy, we're happy, there's nothing wrong here. Anytime a communist government says that, okay, you should probably get freaked out. I can say that, because of that, though, because of what you just said, Senator Tom Cotton advised the administration to cut travel from China at that point to prevent the amount of spread cases, because we just didn't know what we were getting into. So I can say that because of that, because of at least that somewhat form of caution that we had then, that did prevent, I think, regardless of what a lot of people say, a lot more cases being here in the United States. Now, I really do hope that people listening to this take it seriously. Social distance, it does work. We have to be cautious. But in regards to the pointing of the fingers, I don't think that that's going to help anything. We need to be working together, focusing on the bigger task at hand, and that's conquering this virus.
And by
Sally,
the way,
is there a
one who actually banned travel to China in January 31st, and then had Democrats who were saying that was going way too far and it wouldn't help. So I feel like that's part of it too, is that if we're going to call out people who are saying that, why can't you be able to talk about the failings of Trump? Well, Trump did do something early, and a lot of people thought it was too much. So I think that's part of it.
Sally, is there a lack of a clarion opposition voice on the left right now? Should Joe Biden be doing more? If he's the presumptive nominee, should he be speaking out more? Should he be speaking out to criticize the president? Should he be speaking out to try to assist the president in some way? Where is the Democrats' leader at the moment?
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's this is where you get the nominee you wanted. And I've for some time now thought, I feel like we could kind of use a do-over on this, because I'm not sure in the moment we're in and the sort of situation and the nature of, listen, normal disclaimer statement, I will support the Democratic nominee, whoever that nominee may be. And, Joe Biden's sort of claim to electability was he would be the return to normalcy for America. Well, now we're in a situation where things may never be the same ever again. And so I think he is a, dyed in the wool, old school politician in the sense that he is very careful in a moment like this to not stick his neck out, to not be seen as politicking or engaging in politics. And there's something to be said for that in, maybe the way things were 4 years ago, but the way things are now, I do think his voice and his leadership is missing. And that being said, we happen to have a very deep bench and a lot of strong people on the party, both in Congress and out, who are being very, I think, strong voices and making strong moral points in this moment.
I'm a little confused then. So is the desire to not put politics into this pandemic, or is it that we should be putting more politics into it and have a Democratic nominee who is more political?
We shouldn't politicize the pandemic. Politics is not going anywhere. The politics is already here, right? But we shouldn't politicize the pandemic. And no, Joe Biden has not been the leader. When people say that they want to return to normalcy, I would like to know what normalcy they're talking about. That as a person of color, you know what I mean? Like as a woman, as a person of color, when they say we want to get America back to where it used to be, what exactly are they talking about? Because when you're talking about when Joe Biden, who's riding off of the Obama train, well, let's be real, and got so many people of color just falling behind him and fawning after him because they assume that he's the Obama guy. What exactly are we trying to get back to? Like, I just think that the world will never be the same again. And so that's why people get mad at me from everywhere, because I'm like, I'm not in this to be a fan of somebody. I want this country to be the best that it can be for everybody in it. And
sorry, let me just be real clear. I'm not saying he was my choice, right?
I heard that.
And I'm not endorsing, I do not think we need to return to quote unquote normalcy, and the status quo was really, really problematic.
Listen,
and it's part of what made us so vulnerable in this moment, and the inequality that this disease is clearly preying upon. So
and let me just say this about Joe Biden real quickly, because he took a long time to even respond, right? Everybody else was like, hey, man, I don't know everything, but I got to show up to the people. He disappeared, but he was in D-Nice's Instagram party. Whoever was managing, if it was him or whoever's managing his social media, throwing a thumbs up on an Instagram party in the middle of this pandemic without making an announcement about what he thought about what was happening happening in the country with regards to this pandemic. And I think we just need to start calling out all of these people, all of them.
I'll say this. I'll say this. If I were a Republican listening to how the heck are we going to get along for the past 2 weeks, I would be in a really good mood, because for the second week in a row, both of the progressives on our panel have poo-pooed the idea of Joe Biden as the president and as the nominee. And we tend to try to have someone from the establishment left, so to speak, and the anti-establishment left, and every single one of the four has been disappointed in Joe Biden. Does that excite you, Anna? Does that make you feel like your nominee or your incumbent is in a much better position? I mean, last week, Torre, who has traditionally been a supporter of Biden, was not satisfied with Biden. Sally, you have very clearly stated that you will support the Democratic nominee, whoever it is. You asked for a do-over a minute ago. Anna, does this excite you?
I'm not a fan of Biden. I think that Biden's, I think he's a weirdo. And I can tell you that, in general, I can say that part of the problem with politics is that you have people that go there and they do it. They think they're going to retire, and they're there for, 30 years. They're not even plugged into what the people, the voting class, the working class is really fighting for. And I can tell you that, maybe I'm an anomaly in the sense that, I come from a working class family. My dad stocks shelves at a grocery store. You think I don't worry about that? Like, his response to everything that's happening, I don't take that into account to everything that I do. And I try to raise awareness on, because that's the type of person that really is affected by this. The people that are working every single night to make sure that we can get the food on our table. I mean, that hits really close to home. And when you have people running away from a problem, hiding, and then using their party BS to really not help people, but make it a political play, it disgusts me. And that's part of the reason why I'm running for office. I'm tired of that.
And I'll tell you, I know the Republicans I know, they're turned off by Joe Biden because they feel like he's pandering to them. So he is so, like, it's just been so ridiculous. And listen, I'm not a psychiatrist, nor am I a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. But can we be clear about all of his incoherent messages? Can we agree that every single time you see him talking and shuffling papers and the stuff that's coming out of his mouth, at some point, I think the people around him are cruel. Like, we need to be honest about these things, because it just seems like, am I crazy? Because I watch him and I'm like, what is he talking about?
Antonia, a lot of people who I think, listen, I think I own my bias as well, and I've run for Congress as a Democrat, so no one's going to be confused as to where I stand on issues. But I think a lot of people who supported Joe Biden, Antonia, on the Democratic side at least, believed that he might, maybe this is answering Aida's question a little bit, he might try to return things to a place where, like this podcast is struggling to find out, where people can get along. And one of the things that I think surprised a lot of folks this week was he was asked about Nancy Pelosi's question about Donald Trump having blood on his hands, and he was asked to respond to that. And he said specifically that Donald Trump is not responsible for coronavirus. And I think he tried to take a gentler tack than some of the Democrats in the past who are currently in office have tried to take. So I think for some people in the Democratic Party, he symbolized a return to trying to get along with the other side. So my question for you, Antonia, is it too late for that? Does it matter? Do people want to get along anymore? And is trying to get along a waste of time and energy?
I think definitely the attraction to Biden is that people want that, like she was saying, the sense of normalcy back. I think he definitely is the polished politician when it comes to everything like that. And well, on the fact that the news media doesn't talk about the fact that he has gaffes like saying that poor kids are just as bright as white kids, or, cursing out a worker and saying that he just doesn't want to have AR-14s, which don't exist. That's the type of stuff that just completely is, if anything, already has, just completely pushed off and turned off those people in middle America, which I remember when Trump won and New York Times and NPR, they got it for a second that maybe we should be listening to middle America. And here we are again, a nominee as Biden, who is the epitome of a sharp-looking politician being the person who is the nominee for the Democratic Party and doesn't get anything about middle America at all. So I think that's what it is. This is an election about normalcy. It's not about I'm excited about this candidate. Look, I was a Democrat before. I voted for Donald. I voted for Obama twice in 2008 and 2012, and I still respect the family. I'm not going to be one of those people who are going to try and degrade Obama or even his legacy. I just changed values. I just didn't have the same values as the Democratic Party, and that's it. And I think that's really what it comes down to a lot of people is, what do I want to do? I see that person? Am I reflected in that person that's going to be the leader of the United States, or do I not? And do my values match with that person?
Sally, you laughed when I suggested. You laughed, Sally, when I suggested that maybe it was too late. It was too late to try to get along. Did you have a thought on that?
Oh, listen. Well, okay. So part of the issue here is we all like to think as Democrats that our preferred candidate would be behaving differently in this moment. But the fact is that, that while no one was really noticing because it was the most anticlimactic end of a primary, it just sort of, faded into a virus. The primary is in effect over. Now Biden is in effect running in a general election, except that there's no campaigning. And it's just it is either way, as a general election candidate, at least again, back in normal days, you would be trying to, appeal to the broadest base, and you're not. And again, in the middle of this kind of crisis, you don't want to necessarily be. It's this weird thing where, yes, you want to be campaigning, but you don't really want to be politicking, and that is a hard position for anyone to be in. And we like to think that maybe our candidate would have behaved differently in this moment, but maybe they wouldn't have. Now, okay. Your other question. I happen to believe that the perhaps central thing that we need to figure out how to do as a nation is come together. And that doesn't mean leave aside our beliefs, our values, our uniqueness, our differences. But it does mean figure out how we have those differences of opinion, differences of identity, differences of even core values sometimes, while at the same time also connecting with, remembering, and embracing what we share in common, right? And I think that as much as we're even arguing in this conversation, like, we all agree we don't want people to die. We all agree we wish we'd done some things differently. We hope we do some things going, like, there is a lot that connects us. And I think, unfortunately, and this is a historic phenomenon in our country, right? Historically, the United States has really, really struggled with everyone being included in the American project. And we are at a stage where we are doing that again. We were already having that struggle again. And now we have a deadly virus mapped on top of that inequality and injustice. So figuring out how we actually all move forward together is going to be, it was the central, I think, question before, and certainly in the wake of the devastation of this virus is going to be our core challenge as a people.
Let me throw one more bomb in the water before we move on to our quick fire questions from our listeners. Aida, is this the ideal time to be making an argument for universal health care?
Absolutely. I think
why?
Whatever version is,
Anna,
what's funny? Where are we going to get the money from? Where are we going to get the money from? And this trillion package came out of nowhere, where we finally found out where we get the money from. Yes, because the people. So see, this is the thing that I think about. I don't hate anybody. So I don't operate from that. What I operate from is thinking about the average person. Now, when you talk about the lower income neighborhoods of people who include white, black, brown alike, it's not just black and brown people who are poor. There are a lot of poor white people in this country. And you talk about these extremists, because that's who has the bullhorn. Those are the people that have the cameras on them all the time, are the extremists. The people who are always chanting and they're always fighting and they hate the other side, and they hate, and they use all the terms to talk bad about other people. Meanwhile, the average person that has to go to work every day, that doesn't have time for that. They don't have time to be on Instagram.
But tell me about healthcare, because that's what I have a question about.
I'm about to tell you about healthcare. Those are the people that are going to suffer the most in a situation like this, right? Because Kris Jenner went and got tested for this, and she didn't even have a symptom, and she went and got tested for it. My mother still hasn't gotten tested for this, and she has cold symptoms in Florida. So, of course, I would believe that this is a time for universal health care. That does not mean that I want America to be Cuba, because we
Anna,
have...
how do you...
Wait, I'm
Anna,
not
how do
finished.
you-
I'm not finished.
Yeah.
Because I know we get into the socialism talk, and my father's from Cuba. We start having these conversations, and people start saying, we are socialists when it benefits the top, when it benefits rich people. But when it comes down to the average man, we repel that. So yes, it is a time for universal health care for these people who are suffering right now, the people who are dying in the hospitals by themselves, the 16-year-old boy in California who couldn't even go to the hospital because he didn't have health care and died.
Well, I want to let Anna get in here and make the counter argument, because there is a strong argument from some people on the left that, everything that Aida just said, that this is a time where we should have far greater access to healthcare. The president even specifically, worked with pharmaceutical companies, healthcare companies, to make testing free. Does it weaken the conservative argument when we have a pandemic? Does it weaken the conservative argument that healthcare should be still in control of private insurance companies?
So here's my perspective on it, and I think I bring a unique approach, and one that I was looking at doing the whole medical school doctor route, and I kind of know a little bit about what's involved in regards to why health insurance is so high from a physician and a carrier perspective. The problem with universal health care is that in theory it sounds great, but is it actually possible to be done? One being that we don't have enough doctors, nurses, and then in addition to that, the quality of healthcare drastically declines, which is why a majority of people that do offer universal healthcare in other countries end up coming to the United States for treatment, because at the end of the day, they're not actually able to sustain some of those life-saving procedures. But moving forward with that, I can say that, I do think insurance should be more affordable. And I do think that you should have people that, for example, like my dad, who literally stocks shelves, should be able to afford that on that wage, but that has to come through legislation reform at the top down. And the problem is you have so much corporate interest keeping politicians on both sides of the table pushing legislation so that reform can't happen. And so I think that when we're looking at how do you actually take something like that, how do you apply it, make it affordable, but not necessarily, when I say universal healthcare, that's something that comes out of the taxpayer. I want to give people an option to afford it, but not necessarily where you're forcing and then essentially bankrupting the economy to do so. I think that everyone, and this is coming from someone who literally wanted to become a doctor, open up my own clinic for low-income people, you have to do it from the top down. And that has to come in from DC on both sides, from people that are not being controlled and lobbying for these corporate interests.
I just wanted to say something about that, because I really think that one of the things that I really would love for us to do is we have to be objective when we talk about other countries. We really like to pump our chest a lot and say that America is the greatest at a lot of things, but we do go seek medical guidance and advice in other countries that do not need us, right? We were knocking on Germany's door trying to find out about how to flatten the curve in America. So we have to stop talking like we're just the best at everything, and we're not. We are just like everybody else, imperfect, flawed. And yes, I do think that this is a matter of corporations and on both sides, but I do not think that is going to diminish or devalue the quality of healthcare in this country if it's accessible to everybody. And the reason why we don't have the doctors is because it's so expensive to become a doctor in this country, and we have so many people in debt because they can't go to school. And we're looking at it from looking at it specifically, but we don't look at it holistically. And there are a lot of things that need to be reformed so that this actual system could work for everybody in this country. And I'm tired of poor people always getting the short end of the stick everywhere you go. And that has nothing to do with race.
There is a doctor shortage, and I do believe that if we could make going to medical school, one, not so darn expensive, because it really is.
Yeah.
I mean, had it not been for the military, I wouldn't have been able to even afford it. I would have been,
Mm-hmm.
probably $100,000 in debt, and then that would be it. But the point is when you're looking at this and how to actually make it something to where people can, attain it and access it, it's a really big problem. And Clay, I'm sure like, what it's like to run for Congress. You know what happens with lobbyists. You know when you go in, what you're taking on. And the thing is, the objective is if you can raise that clean money is what I call it, and then get in there to do that reform. I mean, that's really the only way that we'll see change that's really for the betterment of the people, not these other groups. So I say that, on that topic, coming from a perspective of one, I'm still married to a military member. I still have TRICARE, which is a military health insurance. If there's an option for me to go on base or off base, I choose to go off base because at the end of the day, it's not the best healthcare. And, part of the problem that we have even with the VA now is that although the military promises insurance and healthcare for some of the veterans, and I myself use it, what ends up happening is because of that, you have a lot of red tape and sometimes people that are not incentivized to be as good as they could be because they know that they're going to be getting that VA paycheck. They're not providing the best care. And I think that in theory, again, it sounds great, but the problem is I think people. And, we just can't put too much of a trust in government to do that when at the end of the day, we could do it and reform it in a different way to where it's more affordable and people can get access to great healthcare. That's actually something that's worth it and not something that's just draining all the wrong people for all the wrong reasons.
Okay, I'm going to move on to our quick fire round where we take questions from our listeners, and I don't always randomly assign them to people. Some of them will be focused, but they don't necessarily all have to do with the virus or healthcare right now. Although, as you might imagine, that's what's on a lot of people's minds. So we're just going to go with one for each of you, and you can answer as quickly and thoroughly, whatever as you want to. Matteo Portelli, it sounds like, from Instagram asks, Antonia, I'll give this one to you. Do you think emotional polarization dismays teenagers from engaging with politics?
Well, I do a lot of work. I'm the director of outreach for Gun Owners of America, and I focus a lot on student outreach. And so that's my passion. That's my heart, is talking to a lot of students. And a lot of students come to me and ask me how are they able to engage in politics because they don't know where to start. I think part of it is that, a lot of young people, including myself, growing up in the last even just 10 years of seeing politics and not being interested in being a part of it because of the partisanship, because of not seeing actual solutions that really work for everyone. And so I think part of it is just to say that we need to encourage young people to know that their vote counts, that when their voice counts, that they can stand up and speak out about the issues that are important to them. I always take it as a one-on-one approach. If I can help one person change their mind on politics, then I'm doing my job. And so I think that's part of it, is that the social media age, where if you don't have thousands of influencers or followers, then you're not really doing something. That's not true. At the end of the day, it comes down to face-to-face type of changing minds and hearts and minds.
Okay, Sally Steve from Butte, I'm assuming that's Butte, Montana, asks, wasn't Andrew Yang the man? Wasn't Andrew Yang the man for the moment?
What am I supposed to do with that question?
I don't know. Hey, we honor our listeners' questions, so do with it whatever you choose.
I should say, I know this isn't the time exactly, but I should say, because it's late, this is not my ideal time. So my brain starts to fade. So I should say I have inordinate gratitude to Andrew Yang for two reasons in this moment. One, because he anticipated even before we saw this sort of out of nowhere global pandemic that the changing nature of the U.S. economy and the global economy would necessitate what incidentally has been a good idea even before, which is the idea of a universal basic income. And obviously, in the wake of this pandemic, a lot of people, including Republicans, took his idea off the shelf, as it were, and are, at least in a short-term way, implementing it. He also, by the way, has my enduring gratitude because he, in sticking with those principles, supported the One Fair Wage Emergency Fund for service workers, restaurant workers, and other gig workers, which is providing that sort of short-term emergency cash assistance, which I helped to launch. OFW emergencyfund.org, everyone, if you want to support, or if you want to apply for assistance and support if you are a worker. Andrew Yang made a very generous donation to support that and is very aware, as we all must be, that not all workers, not all service workers are going to be beneficiaries of public assistance, including the emergency public assistance from the federal government. So look, he was right on that. I think a lot of the things that Bernie has said suddenly, don't seem so fringe, but seem like, pretty core central ideas, like this would not be the kind of crisis it is if everyone had access to affordable quality healthcare, including Medicare for all. I think, look, obviously, or for those who know, Liz Warren was my candidate, and hell, I think she'd be amazing president of this moment, because Lord knows she has a plan for all of this. So, again, it's what if we really want to talk about the Democratic, all the candidates, with maybe the exception of one or two or three, had the...
Well, he was really just asking about the one, the Andrew Yang.
I'm sorry, because I can't just answer the...
Well, feel free to go through every candidate who's ever run for president.
All I was going to say was, I feel like we had a really strong bench of really, visionary candidates with a lot of great ideas. And the great thing going forward is that we get to be the party that includes and incorporates all of them.
Sally, I feel like we need to get you some antidepressants. You seem a little sad right now.
Were you kidding me? How can you not be sad in this moment? Sorry, but this is...
Oh, come on. You're so light and funny usually. You're supposed to cheer me up. Let me move on to
I'm
Anna.
Sorry. It's
How dare you?
This is what pandemics do to me, I guess.
Right. Anna,
preventable deaths make me sad. Okay.
Yuri from Denver asks, Anna, should Congress be able to vote off the record?
No, I think that part of the beauty of us being a open and very public society is we should know exactly what our congressional representatives are doing. I think full transparency is probably the best thing that could be done for the United States currently.
I'm going to ask Aida the same question. Aida?
Yeah, I agree.
Should Congress be able to vote off the record?
They should be held accountable for because we talked about it earlier, and she talked about it earlier. Then we know who's in their pockets, who's writing the checks, and we understand. I'm such a big advocate of local government and people being aware of who they're supporting that's affecting their everyday lives, and they don't, because they're so caught up with the national stuff that they don't pay attention to the district attorneys and the sheriffs. So yeah, we need to know what you're voting for, who you're supporting, and who's paying you. And we knew not to love Cory Booker because we were like,
well, I'm interested in this. I didn't get this question until this afternoon, so I had not seen that someone had sent it in. And normally this is quick fire and we don't stay on it. But now I'm sort of interested in it because, Aida, you mentioned, we want to know who's padding their pockets. We all, it seems to be there's an agreement there. But if Congress were voting off the record, would they not be able to not have to be in someone's pocket? I mean, not being able to vote your conscience versus voting based on what a special interest has asked you to do. Would they be freed up to do that if they were able to vote off the record?
Now we go back to Anna's point about people. I think that, are they going to vote with their conscience? No, I think they need to be held accountable, and they are public servants, and they work for us, and they should be totally accountable for the decisions that they're making, and we should know about the stuff that they're doing, because it's because of the things that we don't know that they're doing that we have so many problems.
Okay. I'm going to end with this one. I'm going to give it to you anyway, Aida, but it's quite rhetorical. We take any and all questions from viewers. This one's from Instagram, John Ska50. He says, here we go. To the liberals, Democrats up there, how can you honestly support your party right now? You don't have to answer that because the goal of this entire podcast is to see how we're going to get along. I'm not sure that question was asked in the spirit of getting along necessarily.
I will answer it. You know why? Because
go for it.
I don't support the Democratic Party blindly. I am not a cult member. I am a human being that's well within my faculties. I'm multidimensional. There are some things that I do not agree with a lot of these politicians, and it is my right as an American to question them and take them to task. So when we could all say that about everybody, people say that to people who support Donald Trump blindly all the time. How could you, with good conscience, support a man that refers to human beings as this, that said, grab them by the vagina? How could you? How about you allow me to just be a human being that is multidimensional, and I think on many levels, and I don't support everything that the Democratic Party does. Neither do I support any politician blindly, because I think that that's the problem. It's the idolatry and the worship that has us in this problem. Those people are public servants. They're not rock stars. They're not famous. They're not celebrities. They are public servants, and we need to put them back into their proper place.
I think that's a perfect place to end right at this segment, because I will say all four of the panelists tonight have criticized their own party at some point this evening, which is one way. Which is one way, like you just said, Aida, for people to be independent, and maybe that's how we end up getting along at the end of the day. So we're going to end the evening like we have the past few weeks with an opportunity for all of our panelists to tell us some creative, interesting, entertaining, informative ways that we can beat the quarantine as we're stuck in our houses for the next, what seems like maybe 4 more weeks. Who knows? We want to ask all of our panelists to tell us about something that they are working on themselves, that we can watch, where we can see them, where we can hear them, and at the same time, tell us something that they specifically are being entertained or informed or enlightened by while they are stuck in their houses over the next few weeks. So let's start with Anna. Anna, where can we see and hear you, and what can you advise us or recommend to us to entertain ourselves
So
with?
you guys can kind of always check on my political rants and what I'm doing in regards to commentary on my social media. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, @RealAnnaPaulina. And I actually do a lot of videos, especially now I've been going live. I can say that I've been really focused on just trying to reach out to people, because there's also been kind of an uptick in depression. And right now, with everyone being isolated, obviously, especially being a military member and veteran, that you worry. It's called a battle buddy theory, and you want to check on your friends and family, especially right now, to make sure that they're okay. So I highly recommend that. But something that I've been working on is that for years when I was growing up, I actually had played the guitar. And it was like once I went off to college, once I joined the military, it's like I kind of forgot about it. And since this whole pandemic happened, I realized I was at home a lot, and I saw my guitar in the corner. It was very dusty. And I busted it out, and I, opened it up. And so I pulled up some tabs on the internet, and I started learning how to play How I Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. So that's something that I'm working on, and I probably will be recording a video and putting that up.
I was about to say we better see that on your Instagram very soon. Real Anna Paulina. Antonia, what about you?
Yeah, currently I'm working on making a human. I'm pregnant. So that's part of what I'm doing. Just making sure I can get there. Just a little bit of that. So hopefully by October, everything will die down. I know a lot of pregnant women are really afraid of what's going on, and there's not much info out there when it comes to pregnant women and COVID-19. But something I do want to plug. Oh, wait, did you say that I can plug in somebody else's stuff yet?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Yeah, okay. Do your thing.
Well,
whatever you want.
I'm really excited about. I'm not even Jewish, but there's a woman named Bethany Mendel who last week literally was just like, there are a lot of healthcare workers in New York who are not able to even eat the food that are donated because they're not kosher. And so she decided as a Jewish woman to just go and start donating kosher pizzas to healthcare workers in New York, and people found out about it. And now a week later, it's about $50,000 donations to just helping healthcare workers in New York. So it's called Kosher 19, and I just think it's just an example of the American spirit and people trying to actually have solutions.
That's lovely, and it's nice to be able to take a look at some of the things that people wouldn't normally think of. So that's incredible. Kosher 19, you said? Like COVID-19.
Yeah, kosher19.com. Yeah, kosher19.com.
Okay, very nice. Okay, Sally, what about you?
Well, obviously, as we've all pointed out, I'm just sad and depressed and trying to make it day to day. I, change from
Sally recommends Paxil.
The day from listen, they're all doing very well right now. Those pharmaceutical companies,
right?
The day pajamas. Make sure I have different pajamas for the daytime than the evening.
You're doing better than me then.
I mean, that's not even a joke is the thing. No, look, I mentioned before, I've one of the most, I always have found one of the most helpful things in moments of hardship is to help people who have it worse off than you. And, 4 million restaurant workers have already lost their jobs. Another 5 million are expected to in the coming weeks. Not to mention delivery drivers and Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and other service workers. And so OFWemergencyfund.org, I've been pouring my heart and soul into that and to helping get cash assistance to people who need it quickly and raising as much money as we can to give as much money to people who need it. And honestly, that is, I think trying to do good for others is always a good balm. And it reminds us that we are really all in this together and we all need each other.
Excellent. Aida, you're usually all over the TV somewhere. Anywhere we can see you?
So right now I've been going on Instagram Live as well. And what I've been doing though is I've been staying away from political stuff. And what I do is I bring on a comedian to talk about a time where they did really bad, where they bombed. And then to share a new joke and then share a funny story. So I've been doing that every day. Tiffany Haddish has done it. Like I have quite a few people come on. But I'm raising money.
I'll come on because I'm very good at losing things.
I want you to come. Yeah, I love you. I love you so much.
I'm wonderful at bombing.
Nobody's saying the bridge over troubled waters like you. God dang it! Don't you ever say that. I'm a fan. I was there. I went to that show.
Oh gosh.
But I'm also raising money. A lot of people who sew throughout the country that sew for a living, from the middle of the country all the way to Florida, that work at the towel mills, have lost their jobs. So what I'm doing is raising a fund to pay people, give them a stipend so that they can help make masks for our care workers, medical workers, and help with the PPE. So I set up a GoFundMe. People already started donating, so I'm really excited about that. And it's called Sewing in Action. And then I wanted to shout out also Frederick T. Joseph, who has done a rent relief program on Twitter. And he's been he's teamed up with Cash App, and he's been tweeting people money to help them pay their rent because so many people have lost their jobs. So that's what I've been doing. And of course, I watching Tiger King. I was
going to say, how are we going to make it through this whole thing with all four of you and no one has mentioned Tiger King yet?
We were avoiding the topic because I live next to that Click Carol lady. She's like right over the bridge in Tampa.
Yeah.
Well, you better be careful because she's feeding people to tigers, girl.
So that's why I didn't get Tiger King out. But.
Tiger King transcends all everything. If you haven't seen it, you really should. That was going to be my thing this week was Tiger King, because I don't usually like to get involved in and watch things that are overhyped, and I just got sick and tired of people talking about how much they hyped it, and I finally said, fine, I'll watch an episode. Finished the whole thing in one sitting of the same pajamas that I had worn the day before, Sally. So you're not alone with that.
Thank you very much.
Aida Rodriguez, Antonia Okafor, Anna Paulina, and Sally Kohn. Thank you guys so much for being with us this week. Thank you all for listening. We will be back here next week. Hope no one just fell off their chair. We'll be back here next week. You can send your questions to next week's panelists at Politicon on Twitter and at Politicon on Instagram, or you can email at podcasts@politicon.com. And we will look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody.
Stay safe, everyone. Thanks so much. It was fun doing this with you.